As on-demand media continues to transform the way we consume content, podcasting has emerged as a powerhouse platform in 2025. With its inclusive force, podcasting has made it possible for anyone with a voice and passion to build a global audience and sustainable career. Well, joining me to explore this explosive trend as a side hustle is Jon Savage, founder of Africa Podcast Network and host of the popular Spotify podcast Digital Savage. Well, welcome to Africa's Side Hustle. And just to start onto it, what are the key trends shaping the podcasting industry and how will they impact businesses and creators?
Hi, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. Globally, podcasting is moving at a rate of knots, and a lot of innovation is actually happening here in Africa. Typically, I've spent a lot of the last year in the international conferences. Africa was very late to the party for podcasting, but there's real innovations happening this side that the rest of the world hasn't even caught up on. And I'll give you some examples of that. But even in the last 3 years, the explosiveness of this podcast industry is quite phenomenal. And I was doing talks about podcasting maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And in some of those talks, like at least 50% of the people didn't know what a podcast was. You'd have to explain it. Now look at today. The White House just announced last week or even this week that podcasting, the briefing room is now going to be split between legacy media and they're going to allow podcasters in there, which is just a massive upgrade for the importance of podcasting globally. And also, there are podcasters globally, guys like Joe Rogan, who his podcast alone is bigger than some of the major networks. It's 3 times bigger than CNN. Per episode, Joe Rogan's podcast gets more viewers because now podcasting is both audio and video in 2024 and 2025 than the finale of Get a Lot. And even locally, we also having some success stories, guys like Mac G, who, 1.5 million, which is bigger than some radio stations, Jay Fresh, El Tito, Makhubalo, who is absolutely massive. We're having our own podcast stars coming through here, and it is becoming very quickly a viable, as you would say, side hustle. For me, it's a career because we also run the Africa Podcast Network. So we're working with lots of podcasters on the monetization space, and more, there are more avenues for podcasters to monetize this space. There's kind of a pivotal shift happening at the moment, even globally, where the days of sort of just turning on a mic with your mate, which is what a podcast was, because the space is getting so competitive, it's more important that podcasters are putting effort and thought into their podcasts.
So how can podcasters rather leverage sponsorships, advertising, and also affiliate marketing to generate an income?
It's one of the beauties of podcasting. There are a lot of monetization space, only size of audience that is interesting to brands, it's quality of audience. And there are a lot of brands out there who don't need sort of a fire hydrant approach of reaching everybody. They're looking for a niche home. You might be a high-end fishing rod company, fishing tackle company, and it's very hard to find a place where your community is. And so because podcasters are growing these communities, there's a lot of commercial opportunity there, both for brands to really find and reach an audience, and both for podcasters to build an audience that they can monetize. Other than sort of one-on-one approaches for a podcaster to brands and get a sponsor. With the Africa Podcast Network, we are the largest podcast network in Africa. We're not only working with the largest content creators and podcasters, we're now also working with global networks like the BBC and Amazon and representing them here in Africa. So what that has actually created is a way to create scalable media in the podcasting space, able to do for podcasters. Live events is another thing that is creating a lot of opportunities for them. And, less so, there's a Patreon, which is where people can sort of subscribe to your podcast, a pay subscription. From a brand perspective, there's no denying, if I just look at the last 11 months, that podcasting, all of the global research has shown that podcasting has the highest attention rate of any media and the highest conversion rate of any media. So more and more brands are dipping their toe
So what are the essential elements of producing a high-quality podcast, and how can businesses invest in their production capabilities?
Well, that's kind of a two-pronged question. There's two ways for brands for businesses to work with podcasters. The one is to build your own podcast. And that is something that not for everybody, but if you are the type of brand that really focuses on value, um, the value to your customer, podcasting is a really brilliant way to build a really deep and honest relationship with brands. And it's an audience that really stays with you, asks question and engage. So it's a very powerful medium, but it's a highly competitive space. So if you're a brand and you're going to enter into the podcasting space, you've really got to know what you're doing. You've really got to go in with a very clear idea of what you're trying to do. On the other side, there are already podcasters who are making have huge audiences and have made a huge impact in even the B2B market or the B2C market. And there's a lot of opportunities for brands to work with podcasters to get their message across or to educate their audiences about what their brand is about.
So what role do podcast networks like APN play in supporting podcasters and helping them rather reach wider audiences?
Well, our business is quite deep in this space because we have a few components. We own Amped Studios, which is the largest empowerment hub, music and podcasting studio in Newtown. And that has really been, we host masterclasses there every single week. And that whole Amped Studios is completely focused on building a podcasting community where you can have speed networking, you can meet other podcasters, there's cameras, there's lights. You don't need anything to come there. So we have thousands of podcasters recording their podcasts there, and they're learning and they're meeting other podcasting. So that really has helped create a podcasting environment. And then once they become monetizable, i.e., once they have an audience that is strong, and then they move into the Africa Podcast Network component where we help monetize their shows. Our entire business has always been about empowering and creating an economy, a creator economy, creating income for creators, both in music and the podcasting and the YouTubing space.
And just before I actually let you go, how can podcasting be used as a career development tool? And what opportunities are available for podcasters looking to transition into new roles or industries?
Podcasting is really fun and cool, and it's not for everyone, the podcasting part. But it is becoming more and more of a commercial opportunity where it's been a hobbyist's game for the longest time. If I just look at the revenue that we're making for our podcasters, it's significant and it's growing really, really fast. And I kind of look at podcasting as sort of Bitcoin-esque in the sense that in the way Bitcoin is a decentralized currency, podcasting is decentralized media. And it's in the kind of early days of Bitcoin where people just didn't know what it was, but they were investing in it and still. And those who really understood the media and stick with it, they were the long-term winners. And podcasting is in the same space where it's fledgling, it's already commercially viable, it's moving at a really rapid pace. So if I was going to invest my time in podcasting, now would be a really good time to do it because it's getting more and more competitive and it's building very, very quickly.
Well, thank you for joining us on today's show on Africa Side Hustle. And that's Jon Savage, founder of the Africa Podcast Network and host of the popular Spotify podcast Digital Savage. Just, sharing his insights and practical tips for aspiring podcasters looking to launch and grow their own shows as a side hustle. Well, as we conclude today's episode, remember that Africa's entrepreneurial spirit is unstoppable. Turn your passions into profits and join the movement. Share your hustle story with us on social media using hashtag #AfricaSideHustle, and don't forget to subscribe for more entrepreneurial stories, business news and insights on CNBCAfrica.com. Till next week.